I would like to speak about one of the most famous and boldest people of the 20th century. One of the most influential, one of the greatest influencers. His name, Shmuel Gelbfish. Shmuel Gelbfish. What, you don't know the name? Born in Poland, 1882, some say 1879. Walked to Hamburg. Made his way to England, worked in hard labor for 2 years to get a ticket to get on a boat and arrive in Philadelphia. He didn't speak English. He had no skills. He knew nothing. He was a poverty-stricken kid who had no way to make a living. So he got a job in Gloversville, New York, selling gloves. And you know something? He was good. He was a real good salesman. Started to make some money. And on a trip to New York City, walking by Herald Square, he walked into a Nickelodeon. Most of you don't know what a Nickelodeon is, but it was a short 5 or 10 minute flicker film that was around 120 years ago. And he liked it. In fact, he liked it so much, he walked out of that place thinking, why doesn't anyone do a full-length movie? Why has no one ever made a full-length movie? Now he was excited. Oh, he got excited. So Shmuel called his brother-in-law, Jesse Lasky. Said, I want to make a full-length movie. He said, are you crazy? No one's ever done that. No one's ever attempted anything like that. No one was bold enough to attempt something like that. What a stupid idea. But Shmuel persisted. Jesse Lasky had a nice, safe career as a vaudeville actor and a vaudeville director and producer. Why would he want to give that up for a stupid idea to make a movie? But Shmuel was very convincing. He's a bit of a bully. And eventually he got his brother-in-law to say yes. But they needed a director. And Jesse Lasky knew someone named Cecil B. DeMille. Got them all together. Decided they're going to make a movie. The first one in history. But how do you do that? There was the Edison Trust. You had to get a license from Edison in order to make a movie on the East Coast. No problem. Shmuel sent them to the West Coast. There's a very, very famous telegram from Cecil B. DeMille to Shmuel Gelbfish that said something like this. Found a barn for shooting in a town called Hollywood. And they went there, and they began shooting a film called Squaw Man. Obviously, there was no sound. Yes, there was a silent movie. Robert Farnham was the only actor of any note in that movie. They were nervous and scared, but they filled theaters all over the United States with the Squaw Man. It was a hit. The theaters wanted another 11 movies from this group. All of a sudden, from obscurity, Shmuel Gelbfish was known right through the country. They needed help. They needed other talent. And there was a fellow named Adolph Zucker who had a team called Famous Players. They too had the idea to produce a movie, and they decided to merge. Well, Adolph Zucker didn't like Shmuel Gelbfish. Shmuel Gelbfish didn't like Adolph Zucker. So when the merger was formed, Adolph Zucker fired Shmuel Gelbfish. That studio went on to become Paramount Pictures. Undaunted, Shmuel went out there and hunted down the Selwyn brothers, very famous Broadway producers. They decided to form a merger. They started making movies. They were successful. So they needed help with all the production requirements, And they brought in two guys named Marcus Lowe and Louis B. Mayer. Well, Marcus Lowe and Louis B. Mayer didn't like Shmuel Gelfish. Shmuel Gelfish didn't like Marcus Lowe and Louis B. Mayer. So when the merger was formed, the first thing they did is they fired Shmuel Gelfish. That studio went on to become MGM. Pop quiz. When Shmuel Gelfish started his third production company, how many partners do you think he had? None. None! None! Never! Never again. And all he did was become the most famous independent movie producer in history. Dead End, Dodsworth, Little Foxes, Wuthering Heights, Pride of the Yankees, Porgy and Bess, and possibly the best movie of the 20th century, The Best Years of Our Lives, with Myrna Loy and Frederick March, for which he won an Oscar. Of course, by then, Shmuel Gelfish anglicized his name to Samuel Goldwyn. He is recognized today as the greatest independent movie producer in history. Which brings me to Alex McCully. I was involved in a movie called 37 Ghosts. It's my favorite movie because I'm in it. And they had a young actor there who was playing a sick, demented, crazy, wackadoodle teacher who actually existed when the castle was a school. And I was so impressed with him as an actor. I was just impressed with him. He really played the role beautifully. But he was also on the other side of the camera. Not only was he an actor, he was also a filmmaker. And he was terrific. So one day, Alex McCully approached me about a story that he read. Now folks, I get scripts all day long. I read, the first or second page, and 99 out of 100 times I throw it in the trash can, because that's where it belongs. When I heard this story, it got me. It's a true story about a famous sports writer and journalist who was thrown for a loop in his life when he discovered the grandson that he loved died. Not only did he died as a hobo, also known as a train hopper. And Dave, the grandfather, was moved by this and, of course, destroyed, losing his grandson. But he approached it not as a bereaved grandfather. He approached it as a journalist. He wanted to discover exactly what happened. So, as a journalist, he began train hopping with the very same people his grandson Jared began train hopping with. And he spoke to them, and he recorded what he had to say, and he traveled back and forth through the United States, getting this information, speaking to Jared's actual friends, understanding what would make a young person want to ride the rails the rest of their life, to become a hobo. And he started understanding, and he started to explain to them the impact that this was having on their families. And while I will let Alex finish the story because it is very circular and goes right back home, I fell in love with the story when I heard it. I really did. Today, I'm going to bring up someone that very easily could become the next Samuel Goldwyn. Sounds outrageous, doesn't it? But I don't think it is. To quote Samuel Goldwyn, in what is now called a Goldwynism, I'm not always right, but I'm never wrong. Alex McCully.
My name is Alex McCully. I'm a filmmaker from New Jersey, and I have a story for you. Now, the setting begins in a beat-up Acura that's hurtling its way toward Illinois. The characters are me and a buddy of mine who I had met 2 months prior. His name is Kevin. And I shanghaied him into driving to Illinois with me from Jersey, 13 hours straight, on a whim. Well, maybe whim's not the proper word. But I don't know what the word is for when you're driving 13 hours to Illinois to beg an author to let you make a movie out of his novel. I don't know if there is a word for it. I'm sure the Germans have one. Now, of course, the story that Stephen told is the story of Dave. Dave is the author. It is autobiographical. He is a sports writer. And of course, his family has a pretty comfortable living. It's nothing that you would run away from home, you know. So his grandson decides to up and into the wild style become a hobo, become a train hopper. This was a conscious choice. He wasn't destitute. There was no financial thing. He decided that the train was his way of living. And he was maybe 19, 20 at the time, which, by the way, this all happened in the early 2010s. Did you guys know there were still hobos? Like, that's still a thing that people did, right? You figured it died with Kerouac and Ginsberg, but no, it's still a thing. And it is a whole underground community that exists. Yeah, I swear to God, if you YouTube train hopping, there's videos of how to train hop that these people give. And once again, it's a whole underground community that nobody knows about. It's not covered on any news agency. It's not sexy to talk about, but it's there, and it's right under our noses. So his grandson hits the rails, and he calls his grandfather every once in a while, right? He gets an update. He calls to get a Western Union transfer from his grandfather every once in a while when he needs a bus ticket. But Jared, out on the trains, he met person after person after person. And he went from San Diego to San Francisco to New Mexico to Syracuse to New Orleans, of course, which is one of my favorite parts of the book. He becomes like a king down in New Orleans. They love him. He falls in love on the trains. He gets a cat. And he becomes an alcoholic, and he is almost sober when he dies of a heroin overdose. And they say a parent is not supposed to outlive their child, but what is a grandparent supposed to do in that situation? He did what any grandparent, any sports writer would do. He decided to put his reporter brain on and go on a grand American road trip and meet person after person who had nothing but good things to say about his hobo grandson. Like, nothing but good things to say. Yeah, he liked the drink. Yes, he liked to fight. But what hobo doesn't? What hobo doesn't like to get in drunken brawls? He was a good person. And more than that, he was the person that his grandfather thought he was before he died. I read this book. I bought it on the bargain bin on Audible. It was $2.99. And I was driving to work listening to this book, and I had to pull the car over because I was so overwhelmed. And it drove me. This story made me drive to Illinois, shanghai my new friend, and hit the road and say, maybe this guy will say yes. Maybe he won't even meet us. But it's worth the try, and we're going to see what happens. And he met with us. He met with us at a brewery, and he goes, well, why are you, like, really here? I was like, I'm here to see you, Dave. He goes, no, you have, like, an aunt or someone that's in hospice up in Chicago. Like, I'm, like, on a list of places that you're going. I'm not the priority. And I was like, no, I drove 13 hours to convince you that I'm going to make this movie and that I'm going to do your grandson proud. And he took a long second before he said, okay. And of course, there's more to the conversation. We sat and talked for about 3 hours. And we talked about life, and we talked about the book, and we talked about what his next book is going to be. and we talked about the epilogue of the book, which, of course, the book was written about 10 years ago. Sorry, no, it took place 10 years ago, but it was written in 2019. So, of course, some of that is not updated. A bunch of the characters in the book are now dead, or in prison, or lost. We don't know where they are. They're not in touch with their families anymore. And this is a story that is about everything. I know, that's a broad thing to say, right? It's universal. It's about grandsons and grandfathers, but it's also about youth and love and triumph and almost triumph. And it's about senseless loss and what we can do in the face of it. So I said to him, I want to make your book into a movie. And he said, okay, let me see a script. I said, in 3 months, I'll have it to you. And he goes, all right, sure, kid, pat. I had the script done in 2.5 months at 108 pages. And I took another 15 days to edit it to make sure I made no mistakes. And I sent it to him at midnight on the 3rd month. And I'm currently in the middle of talking with lawyers and agents and acquisitioning the rights. Now, of course, this is a pitch. What am I pitching? I don't want money. I'm not passing around the coffers. I've got a producer that has his heart set on this story because it means almost as much to him as it means to me, as it means to Dave. I knew kids like Jared. And we know grandfathers and fathers like Dave. My producer is looking to produce it for, if I told you the sum, you'd laugh, because movies don't get made on that amount of money, but we're going to make it. And I don't want your money. What I do want, if you'll have me, are names and numbers. If you have a cousin that does permits down in New Orleans, if your friends, childhood best friends, used to play in the playground with a CEO of one of the train companies, something. I need names and numbers, because a movie doesn't get made for $200,000 without friends. Guys, thank you very much for letting me come up here and talk your ear off. I wouldn't take your time, because I know your time is incredibly valuable. I would not take it unless I thought this was something worth doing. And Stephen, thank you very much for having me.